January 24th, 1943. A stone cellar in central Stalingrad. The temperature inside the room is -20 degrees. Frost covers the brick walls in thick white sheets. The air smells of unwashed bodies, dried blood, and raw fear. There is no sunlight. There is no fresh air. In the darkest corner of the room, a man sits at a small wooden table. He wears a torn grey wool coat. He has wrapped his feet in rags, stripped from dead men. His hands are covered in dirty bandages. His fingers are cracked, bleeding, and stiff from the deep cold. He is doing a very simple job. He is pressing keys on a machine. The machine sits inside a heavy wooden box. It is an Enigma cipher machine. It is the most advanced piece of communication technology on Earth. It uses 3 spinning metal rotors and complex math to turn German words into a secret, unbreakable code. Beside the man, a second soldier turns a hand-cranked generator. The generator whines in the dark. It is hard physical work. The man turning the crank is starving. His ribs press against his skin. His breath comes in short, white clouds. But he cannot stop. That heavy iron crank provides the tiny spark of power the machine needs to work. This man pressing the keys is a radio operator. He belongs to the German 6th Army. Right now, he is the most important man in the ruined city. Above his head, the actual city of Stalingrad is gone. It is a smoking plain of shattered bricks, burned wood, and twisted steel. The Soviet army is firing thousands of heavy artillery shells into those ruins every hour. The ground shakes violently. Down in the cellar, the operator blocks out the noise. Dust falls from the ceiling and covers his thin shoulders. He looks at a piece of paper. He types a message. The machine clicks. The metal rotors spin. The signal goes out into the freezing air. It travels 2,000 miles west. It lands on a warm, well-lit desk in Berlin. The men in Berlin read the message. They drink hot coffee. They smoke fresh cigarettes. They send a reply. They tell the operator to stand firm. They tell him help is coming. They tell him the German army does not retreat. The operator reads the reply. He hands it to his commander. They both look at the paper in the candlelight. They both know it is a lie. They are trapped. There is no help coming. There is no food. There is no ammunition. There is only the deep snow, the Soviet guns, and the ticking clock. This radio is their only connection to the world they left behind. It is a thin, invisible wire stretching across the ice. For weeks, they have used it to beg for rescue. They have used it to call for supplies. They have used it to report their massive losses. But today, the tone of the messages is changing. The men in the freezing cellars are no longer asking for bullets. They have exactly 7 days left to live. 5 months earlier, the world looked very different. August 1942. The German 6th Army marched across the dry steppes of southern Russia. They were a massive, terrifying force. 300,000 men, 400 tanks, 10,000 artillery guns. They moved with absolute speed and total confidence. The sun beat down on their clean uniforms. At their head rode General Friedrich Paulus. Paulus was 52 years old. He was tall, thin, and always perfectly clean. Even in the dusty heat of the Russian summer, his uniform was spotless. He wore sharp white gloves. A nervous tic pulled at the corner of his left eye. Paulus was not a front-line fighter. He had never commanded troops in a major battle before. He was a staff officer. He was a man who loved clean maps, detailed plans, and perfect order. He drew neat red lines on paper and expected reality to match them. His orders from Adolf Hitler were simple. Take the city of Stalingrad, cut off the wide Volga River, break the back of the Soviet Union once and for all. Paulus believed he could do it. Why wouldn't he? The German army had never lost a major field battle. They had crushed Poland in a month. They had taken France in 6 weeks. They had pushed deep into Russia the year before. They were the unquestioned masters of modern war. Their power came from their speed, and their speed came from their radios. The German military ran on constant communication. Every tank had a radio receiver. Every command post had a transmitter. At the center of this massive web sat the Enigma machine. It allowed commanders to talk in total secret. They could coordinate airstrikes, tank assaults, and troop movements in minutes. The enemy heard only static and scrambled letters. The Soviets were always a step behind. This system made the Germans feel invincible. They knew where everyone was. They controlled the map. In late August, the Sixth Army reached Stalingrad. The city stretched out for 20 miles along the edge of the dark Volga River. The Germans pushed into the streets. They expected a quick, clean victory, but the streets did not fall. The Soviet defenders were led by General Vasily Chuikov. Chuikov was 42 years old. He had a thick build, a violent temper, and a face scarred by war. He walked the front lines carrying a heavy wooden cane. He drank pure vodka to stay warm. He did not care about perfect maps. He cared about killing Germans. Chuikov ordered his men to hug the enemy. He told them to stay within 50 yards of the German lines. This meant the German dive bombers could not drop explosives without hitting their own men. The Soviet soldiers fought for every single house. They fought for every room. When they lost the top floor of a building, they fought on the bottom floor. They hid in the dark sewers. They dropped grenades down chimneys. They shot from the shadows. The clean lines on Paulus's maps turned into a bloody mess. The fast, modern war slowed down to a brutal crawl in the dirt. Still, Paulus did not worry. He had the full support of Berlin. He also had history on his side. Just 1 year earlier, a different German force had been trapped by winter snows in a place called Demyansk. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, had flown food and bullets in to save them. The heavy transport planes landed, dropped their cargo, and took the wounded out. The trapped men survived the winter. That was the exact logic Paulus held on to. Germany had the planes. Germany had the radios to direct them. Technology had conquered nature before. It would absolutely do it again. He could not see the fatal flaw in this thinking. Demyansk was a small trap holding 100,000 men. Stalingrad held 300,000. Demyansk required 300 tons of supplies a day. Stalingrad required over 700. Demyansk was very close to German air bases. Stalingrad was hundreds of miles away. Paulus trusted the men above him. He trusted the complex machines that kept him connected to them. He believed the calm voices on the radio telling him they would never let him fall. He underestimated the sheer size of the Soviet plan. While Paulus focused entirely on the city blocks in front of him, the Soviet army was moving quietly behind his back. November 19th, 1942. The frozen ground shook. 1 million Soviet soldiers attacked. They did not hit the city of Stalingrad. They hit the weak lines of Romanian and Italian troops miles away to the north and south. These Allied troops had old weapons. They had no heavy tanks. They were freezing in shallow trenches in the open snow. The Soviet armor drove right over them. The German radio network lit up. Enigma machines clicked in a sudden, violent panic. Operators tapped out frantic warnings. Massive armor attack. Lines broken. Falling back. Send immediate help. Within 4 short days, the two arms of the Soviet attack met in the town of Cellar. The trap snapped shut. The Sixth Army was completely surrounded. 300,000 men were locked inside a frozen ring of Soviet steel. The Germans called it the Kessel, the cauldron. General Paulus stared at his maps in his warm headquarters. The clean lines were gone. A heavy red circle now surrounded his entire army. He picked up the radio. He sent an urgent message to Hitler. He asked for permission to break out. He wanted to turn his massive army around and smash through the Soviet ring before it grew too strong. It was the only logical military choice. The reply came back fast. The Sixth Army will hold its positions. The Luftwaffe will supply you by air. Hermann Göring, the loud, overweight head of the German Air Force, had made an arrogant promise. He swore he could deliver 500 tons of food, fuel, and ammunition every single day. He told Hitler it would be easy. For a brief moment, it looked like it might actually work. In late November, the first heavy Ju-52 transport planes landed at Pitomnik Airfield, just inside the pocket. They brought fresh bread. They brought rifle bullets. The German operators sent back tactical updates. They reported enemy troop numbers. They coordinated bombing runs. The communication system seemed to be holding perfectly. Then the deep Russian winter arrived. December brought violent, blinding blizzards. The temperature dropped to 30 below zero. The heavy oil in the German truck engines froze solid. Mechanics lit fires under the engines just to thaw the metal. The grease on the infantry rifles turned to glue. Men tried to dig defensive trenches, but the ground was harder than concrete. The massive air bridge began to fail. To survive, the 6th Army needed 700 tons of supplies a day. To fight, they needed more. On a good day, the Luftwaffe delivered 100 tons. On a bad day, they delivered 20. Transport planes crashed in the thick snow. Soviet fighter jets shot them out of the dark sky. The German pilots flew blindly through the ice and fog. When the planes did land, they often brought the wrong things. The supply system back in Germany had broken down into complete chaos. One plane arrived completely full of black pepper. Another brought thousands of right boots with no left boots to match. One flight brought 4 tons of summer uniforms. Another brought boxes of condoms instead of medical bandages. The radio traffic began to change. The calm, tactical updates slowed down. The wild requests for food sped up. Wilhelm Hoffmann, a young, thin soldier in the 267th Regiment, wrote in his diary, "We have eaten all the horses. Now we are hunting the dogs. The cold is eating us alive." In the command bunkers, the Enigma operators typed out the hard, terrifying numbers. Rations cut to 2 ounces of bread per man. No fuel for the tanks. Typhus spreading rapidly in the cellars. Frostbite taking 50 men a day. German doctors worked in basements covered in blood. They cut off frozen toes with rusted saws. They had no anesthesia. They had no clean bandages. The lice covered the wounded men in thick gray sheets. The confident men in Berlin read these numbers. They did not change their orders. Hitler sent a message over the secure lines. The word surrender is forbidden. The gap between the map in Berlin and the reality in the snow was growing impossibly wide. In Berlin, they saw a heroic army standing strong. In Stalingrad, men were freezing to death while standing guard. They fell asleep in the snow and simply never woke up. Their friends stripped their clothes off their bodies before they were even cold. The radio operators saw this gap clearly. They sat right in the middle of it. Every day they took messages from dying commanders. They encrypted the begging words. They sent them to a high command that sent back empty promises. "Hold on," Berlin said. "Relief is coming." The operators knew it was a lie. They tracked the movement of the German rescue force. They watched on their maps as the rescue force fought toward them, stopped, turned around, and retreated. By late December, the relief effort was completely dead. The 6th Army was entirely alone. January 10th, 1943, 8:05 in the morning. The gray sky above Stalingrad suddenly turned white. 7,000 Soviet artillery guns opened fire at the exact same moment. The final assault had begun. The Soviets called it Operation Ring. The noise was absolute. The shockwave broke the eardrums of men miles away. The ground rolled like the ocean. The Soviet plan was simple. Squeeze the pocket, crush the Germans into the center of the city, destroy them block by block. The German defense shattered instantly. They had no fuel to move their heavy tanks. They had no artillery shells to fire back. They only had small rifles and bare hands. Men who had not eaten a real meal in 6 weeks tried to hold off heavy armor. They threw themselves under Soviet tanks with crude explosives. The radio operators worked frantically. The airwaves were filled with a desperate, chaotic noise. Sector 7 overrun. Enemy tanks in the wire. Send ammunition immediately. But there was no ammunition left to send. On January 14th, the main German airfield at Pitomnik fell to Soviet tanks. The panic on the runway was pure terror. Wounded men clung to the wings of the last planes taking off. They fell hundreds of feet into the snow. Now, the transport planes could no longer land. The Luftwaffe tried dropping supplies by parachute. Most of the drops blew away in the heavy wind. They landed far behind Soviet lines. Starving German soldiers watched from their frozen trenches as Soviet troops ate German bread and smoked German cigarettes. The human cost became unbearable. Major General Alexander von Daniels commanded the 376th Infantry Division. He was 51 years old. He saw his men chewing on raw horse bones. He saw them wrapping their frozen feet in dead men's coats. He saw young soldiers shooting themselves because they could not stand the blinding pain of their black, frozen fingers. On January 28th, von Daniels made a hard choice. He ignored Berlin. He ignored Paulus. He gathered his surviving men. He walked out into the deep snow. He surrendered. When Berlin found out, the radio traffic turned incredibly dark. Hitler did not send pity. He sent blind anger. He ordered immediate radio silence for any sector that tried to surrender. With one simple order, he deleted entire divisions of his own men from the map. The radio operators felt the heavy weight of their job. They were no longer soldiers fighting a war. They were messengers of death. They sat in freezing basements, tapping keys with bleeding fingers. They translated the end of their friends into dots and dashes. Then came the haunting messages, the ones that broke the system entirely. Usually military radios send formal reports, numbers, coordinates, grid references. But by late January, the cold military code broke down. The raw human terror leaked straight through the Enigma machines. The operators stopped writing like soldiers and started writing like dying men. We are firing our last bullets. The enemy is at the door. No more ammunition. May God protect our families. General Paulus moved his headquarters to a dark cellar under the WWII department store in the center of the ruined city. He was a broken man. His nervous tic was constant now. He sat in the dark. The power had failed. The lights went out. His radio men set up their Enigma machine in the corner. They hand-cranked the heavy iron generator. On January 24th, Paulus sent a plain, honest message to Hitler. Troops without ammunition or food. Effective command no longer possible. Collapse inevitable. Request permission to surrender to save lives. The operator sent the message. He waited in the cold dark. The machine clicked. The reply came back. Hitler's answer was absolute. Capitulation is impossible. The Sixth Army will do its historic duty at Stalingrad until the last man. The logic of the High Command was undeniable now. They did not want the Sixth Army to live. They wanted them to die slowly. Every single day the Sixth Army held out was another day the Soviet Army could not march toward Germany. The men in the cellar were not soldiers anymore. They were a speed bump made of human bones. The final days moved fast. The Soviet Army cut the shrinking pocket in two. The Germans had nowhere to run. They were backed up against the frozen edge of the Volga River. They were completely out of bullets. They were completely out of hope. On January 30th, 1943, Hitler promoted General Paulus. He made him a field marshal. It was not a reward. It was a dark, heavy irony. In the entire history of the German military, no field marshal had ever been taken alive. Hitler was not giving Paulus a medal. He was handing him a loaded pistol. He was telling him to kill himself. Paulus read the decrypted radio message. He looked at his ragged, starving officers in the candlelight. He did not reach for his gun. "I have no intention of shooting myself for that Bohemian corporal," Paulus said quietly. By January 31st, the end had finally arrived. The fighting in the streets had completely stopped. There was only the sound of Soviet boots marching on the rubble. Soviet tanks surrounded the WWII department store. The long barrels of their heavy guns pointed directly at the shattered doors. Down in the cellar, the air was thick with smoke, frost, and human sweat. The radio operators knew this was their last day on Earth. They did something strictly forbidden by military law. They stopped sending tactical reports. They stopped asking for supplies. They used the most secure Enigma machines in the world to send personal farewells. They typed raw, desperate messages to their wives. They sent notes to their mothers. They used the highest military frequencies in the German Empire to simply say goodbye. Tell Maria I love her. I am sorry I will not see the baby grow up. We did our duty. The end is here. The operators in Berlin received these messages. They did not reprimand the dying men. They sat in quiet, warm rooms and took the messages down. They placed them in brown paper files. Many of them were never delivered to the families. At 6:15 in the morning on January 31st, the main radio station inside the Univermag cellar prepared to sign off. A young operator sat at the keys. His cold hands shook violently. He cranked the handle. He sent one final official broadcast to German High Command. The Russians are at the door of our bunker. We are destroying our equipment. He added two final letters, CL. In military radio code, CL means closing station. It means this frequency is dead. Do not reply. He stood up. He took a heavy iron hammer. He brought it down hard on the Enigma machine. He smashed the spinning metal rotors. He broke the typewriter keys. He destroyed the delicate wiring. He hit the machine over and over until it was just a pile of twisted metal. He did not want the Soviets to find its secrets. An hour later, Soviet troops walked down the cellar stairs with their rifles raised. General Paulus stood up. He surrendered the southern half of the 6th Army. 2 days later, on February 2nd, a destroyed tractor factory in the north of the city finally fell. A lone radio operator hiding inside sent one last signal. We have done our duty. Then the German frequency went completely quiet. The static hissed. The deep silence stretched across the ice. The 6th Army was completely gone. 300,000 men had marched into the city in August. 91,000 marched out as prisoners in February. The rest were dead in the snow. The sudden silence on the radio shook the German people. For months, the state radio in Berlin had played bold, victorious music. They told the public that the men in Stalingrad were fighting a noble, heroic battle. They painted a picture of brave men holding the line against impossible odds. They lied. When the truth finally broke out, the state radio played slow, heavy music. They announced that the 6th Army had fallen in glorious combat. They told the country that every single man had fought to the death. But the truth of what really happened in those cellars was permanently recorded in the digital fingerprints left behind. After the war, historians opened the military archives. They looked at the thousands of decrypted radio logs. They did not find a story of glorious combat. They found a story of slow, mechanical murder. They saw the exact dates the food ran out. They tracked the daily drop in temperature alongside the rapidly rising number of dead. They read the raw, desperate words of men who clearly knew their leaders had abandoned them. Joachim Wieder, a German intelligence officer who survived the cauldron, wrote about the radio silence years later. We felt not only physically trapped, but spiritually betrayed, Vida said. The High Command did not see us as men. They saw us as numbers on a ledger. When the numbers no longer balanced, they crossed us out. The Soviet army captured the ruined city. They found the smashed radio equipment scattered in the basements. Today, modern archaeologists still dig in the dirt of Volgograd. They find the bones of the radio operators sitting exactly where they died, right next to the rusted gears of their destroyed machines. The radio logs proved something the survivors already knew. The highest leaders of the German state never intended to save them. The massive air bridge was a theater production. The orders to fight to the last man were designed specifically to buy time for the rest of the German line to rebuild. The Sixth Army was traded for time. The young soldier Wilhelm Hoffmann did not survive the brutal march to the prisoner camps. His diary was found in the dirt by a Soviet soldier. It ended not with grand thoughts of empire, but with the cold, miserable reality of a starving human body. The 91,000 men who surrendered were marched deep into the frozen east. They walked for weeks. Most of them died of typhus and mass starvation within months. Only 5,000 ever saw their homes again. General Paulus lived. He was kept in a comfortable Soviet prison camp. He ate warm meals. He eventually spoke out against Hitler on Soviet radio broadcasts. The staff officer who followed blind orders to the edge of ruin finally broke his silence. Long after, it could save his starving men. Return to the cellar. The heavy frost is still thick on the stone walls. The temperature is still negative 20 degrees. But the dark room is empty now. The wooden table is overturned. The hand-cranked generator is completely silent. The Enigma machine lies in heavy, shattered pieces on the dirt floor. The men who sat here held the most sophisticated piece of technology in the world. They could speak clearly across thousands of miles of ice. They could break their words into perfect mathematical codes. They could touch the ear of the most powerful leaders in Europe in seconds. But perfect communication cannot bridge the gap between a desperate army and a blind command. The German leadership truly believed that modern machines and clean maps could bend the Russian winter to their will. The freezing men in the cellars paid the ultimate price for that arrogance. The radio waves they sent out still echo quietly in the historical record. They are a permanent reminder of the absolute limits of blind obedience. Technology can transmit a plea for help. It cannot force a leader to answer it. The operators smashed their machines. They left the cellar. They walked out into the snow.